You know, anytime I give my opinion on something, it's going to make some people upset. The overwhelming opinion of few, and I'm going to discuss this because it's worth discussing. So I did my 32 team league if I was building from scratch myself, and I was honest about where I would put teams. Put a team in Atlanta, I didn't put a team in Vegas. I state why. People point out, well, LA's in the desert. It kind of is. However, it's also one of the biggest cities in the U.S. It's Los Angeles. You kind of got to have a team in Los Angeles. Ask the NFL about that. So Vegas fans have taken issue with that. And while I can understand that because Vegas has been a major success as an expansion team, the thing is, so was Atlanta. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go way back. That's why I'm wearing my Calgary Flames jersey instead. I'd wear the Atlanta one, but So they peaked, the Atlanta Flames, back to the 70s. They peaked at an average of 14,161 fans per game in their second season, 1973-74. But they fell to 12,258 3 years later, and then 10,577-78. Low attendance meant moving. Cleveland, Kansas City, Oakland, team would get merged into the Cleveland Barons would get merged into the Minnesota North Stars. Teams got moved. We're not drawing. Move them. That was the 70s. Just move them then. Move them somewhere where you can get fans. The Atlanta Flames got moved. The attempt was made to increase local interest by signing Jim Craig, who had been a part of the American Miracle on Ice in 1980, and it just didn't work. Their attendance fell to an average of 10,024. Now you fast forward to the Thrashers. After the departure of the International Hockey League's Atlanta Knights, who played from 92 to 96, to become the Quebec Raphaels, the city of Atlanta was awarded an NHL franchise on June 25th, 1997 as part of a four-team tiered expansion, which included Nashville, Columbus, and St. Paul, Minnesota. And it was a brand new arena. It was built in the same spot as the old Omni, which is what the Flames played in. The Thrashers had been runner-up to the Flames in a poll that they had on naming the team. And of course, you can't call them the Flames again because that went to Calgary. When a team moves, so does their history and their name. Not mentioning any city in particular there. The nickname Thrashers was after Georgia State Bird. Not important in this case. What's important is to take a look at this. The first year the Atlanta Thrashers were in the NHL, they had 17,206 fans per game. They won 18 games all season. The Vegas Golden Knights, the biggest story in the NHL right now, 17,780 fans. And there's a lot of very excited fans, and I get it. And there's a lot of fans who are very much of the opinion that Vegas is just natural for hockey. So was Atlanta. Carolina was a disaster from day one. Absolutely. They had about 9,000 fans per game their first year in Carolina, which is a combination of not a great team, poor ownership, poor marketing. If anything can be done poorly, it gets done in Carolina. This is where it gets weird, though, because, there are fans who'll say, well, this market works and this market doesn't. Like, Ottawa doesn't work. But it did, though. Ottawa was drawing tons of fans to games 4 years ago. I think their attendance was above 16,000 fans. Now it's down in the 12,000 range. Everybody's like, oh, Ottawa doesn't support hockey. Yeah, it can and it does. Ottawa fans come on here and say, look, you can't get to the arena. They feel the tickets are pricey for their current economic situation. And they could very well be right. When you're trying to grade markets, to take a look and say, well, 30 games into this team's existence, it's a roaring success. It is fine, but when in their first, I think it's 16 games at home, they've lost 2 or 3. Well, it's fun going to the rink when you know you're going to win every night. Ask Vancouver fans. They sell out all the time when the team's really good. I'm not saying Vegas wouldn't sell tickets when the team was bad. I'm saying they haven't had to experience any kind of adversity. They got the best players available that any expansion team has ever had outside of 1967, when the St. Louis Blues put together a pretty good team coming out of the first ever expansion. A lot of those players were older, however. And in this case, Vegas got young, good players. Florida decided, we don't want Marchessault. We're tired of almost winning. We want to lose a lot. And what's with this Riley Smith guy? Yeah, he'll probably score 20 goals next year. He'll probably bounce back, but we don't have time to worry about that. We got to cut our budget. Vegas has been fortunate, and it's funny because anytime I talk about how Vegas has been fortunate, or it's been a good run so far in Vegas, the accusation is thrown of, well, hockey guys throwing shade. No. I've watched hockey for a very, very long time. I've watched the league go from 21 teams when I was growing up to 31 now. And almost every time that a new organization comes in, there's a lot of excitement. Ticket sales are brisk, even in Atlanta, for a team that was hot garbage. The Atlanta Thrashers never had a good team, so their attendance did drop. And attendance dropped to 13,476 in their fourth year, but they went back up to 16,240 in 06-07. 07-08, they were 15,831. That's not bad. That's not bad attendance. Their last year in Atlanta, they had 13,469, which is poor, and it's still higher than some of the other teams in the NHL right now. I use Atlanta as an example because the NHL failed in Atlanta twice. And yet I still, if I was putting together a league from scratch, remember, the argument wasn't you're putting together a league as you know it right now. I just go, all right, here's the NHL. That's literally what would happen. If I was putting together a league based on what I already know from the NHL, then, yeah, it would look exactly how it looks right now. I might have a team in Quebec, but I would just make that team number 32, and then, figure out something for Seattle. And then the next thing you know, I'm saying, here's a 40-team league. I did that. It's not a matter of me saying hockey won't work in Vegas. But we really don't know yet. The excitement's really high. Vegas fans are really excited, and they should be. And they're going to get the NFL. They're going to get the NBA. This level of excitement, the NBA will end up in Vegas. The NBA loves to be anywhere they can make a lot of money, and there's money to be made in Vegas. So with the money that can be made, other leagues will go in. And Columbus is an example of this. Isn't always the case, but when you're the only professional franchise in a city, it's a little easier to get the fan base all riled up. Move the Raiders into Vegas. That'll be thousands and thousands of tickets sold for Vegas for football. And football, that's only 8 home games a year. You only get more than 8 if they make the playoffs. It's lots of money to go around. Okay? But since Vegas is seen as this hub and they're growing, hockey got in there first. That does make a difference. But to make a statement of, well, Vegas is this great story right now, so it will always be this great story, is a little foolish. When the Quebec Nordiques moved to Denver, the Avalanche were this great story. The Avalanche won the Cup the next year, and they became a fantastic story. And everybody I knew around here had an Avalanche jersey, and suddenly the Avalanche were the most amazing team in the league, and the Avalanche were awesome. They also didn't go through any adversity that first year. Their first 5 or 6 years in the NHL, they were pretty damn good. Now, going through a rebuild, their attendance has dipped. And there's reasons why their attendance has dipped. I'm not getting into why. But today's big feel-good story doesn't necessarily translate to being tomorrow's really good feel-good story. You know, when I say things like, well, Vegas doesn't have a superstar player, I'm not saying it because I think they're all pricks and they should just go die in a fire. I'm saying it because I don't see a superstar player. I see some very good players. I see some good scoring depth. I see a well-coached defense. I see Colin Miller doing for Vegas what I had feared he would do for Vegas. If you go back and look at videos I did last year related to the Bruins, If you look back at my expansion draft, I had no doubt Colin Miller was going from the Bruins, and I was not happy about it. I always liked Colin Miller's game, other than the times he'd kind of skirt close to the rules. But the idea that somehow if I was putting together a league from scratch that I'd put in Atlanta over Vegas, that somehow is this horrible thing, it's not, though. It wasn't meant as any disservice to any fans of any other teams. It's just, here's how I would put together a league. And there was no history before 30 games ago in Vegas of them supporting a major league professional team. There was a Vegas team in the International League. There have been Vegas minor league teams. Minor league's not the same as major. I can remember, I'm trying to think if they were Phoenix or Arizona, the Roadrunners, an American or International Hockey League team that was pretty good and had some really good buzz. And before the Jets moved there, yeah, the Roadrunners, they were considered a major player. And hey, maybe Phoenix can support a team. And now all you ever hear about is, oh, you got to move out of Phoenix. And the funny part is, there's a lot of revisionist history that goes on here. I'm just one of the holdouts that goes, well, yeah, I'm very pleased with the start they've had. I don't know if I'd put them in contender position based on, they don't have a history. Not having a history is good for you during the regular season. During the playoffs, it gets a little tougher. But there's a lot of people who, before the season started, said, oh, Vegas is dead in the water, Vegas is done, which is what I said, and I admit that. Who now say, oh, Vegas is awesome, and Vegas, and it's like, there's no in between. And I find that strange, and it's something I've noticed a lot online. And, I've seen it quite a bit. Before the season started, I was talking a lot about how Vegas merchandise wasn't available, and it should be. Vegas is going to be very, very popular. People are going to want Vegas gear, and you can't find it. It took until yesterday before a local star had a Vegas hat that I was going to buy. Yesterday. It's December 19th today, which means December 18th, I finally found a hat for Vegas that I've been looking for since July. So the NHL didn't expect this either, or they would have had all of this merchandise available in September. Because if they'd known how much money they'd make off Vegas merchandise, it would have been available much, much sooner. They would have pushed to get the logo reveal and all that stuff done way earlier than they did. So personally, I still stand by the idea that I think the Atlanta fans got screwed. The Atlanta Flames were mismanaged. They went to Calgary because they weren't drawing. Somebody brought in money. Nelson Skalbania said, I'll move them, and he moved them. The Atlanta Thrashers were crap the whole time they were there. They made the playoffs once. And they were hot garbage most of the time they were there. Then they take their one franchise cornerstone after they'd lost Heatley and Hossa. The guy they had to carry the franchise was Kovalchuk, and they pissed him away to the New Jersey Devils for a squat. Nothing. Franchise player, and they got nothing back of value. I like Nicholas Bergfors, okay, but it's not worth losing Kovalchuk for. They're both in Europe now, but Atlanta is in Winnipeg. Stating that a city won't support a team because their team while their team is crap is kind of weird to me. It'd be hard for me, and I've said this in other videos too. Let me just go ahead. I got the keyboard sitting on my legs, and I got my legs up on the bed, but my legs are going to sleep. So, I hadn't anticipated this taking this long. I figured I'd have this done by now. For me, I look at Carolina and I say, okay, they haven't made the playoffs in a while. They haven't regularly made the playoffs basically since they got there. It's got to be hard. It's got to be hard if you have a family. You're trying to take your wife and kids to a game. It's exceedingly expensive. It's prohibitively expensive. And then because you can't go and other people can't go, you've got fans all over the world saying, well, they don't support a hockey team. Get rid of them. And from a Vancouver standpoint, there was the Grizzlies. Vancouver, the Grizzlies left. They were a horrible team. They never made the playoffs while they were in Vancouver. They were awful. Sharif Abdur-Rahim may have been a solid player, but a franchise guy he was not. And then they followed that up with Bryant Reeves. And yet Vancouver's kind of labeled as not really an NBA city. I don't think that's fair. So I do take issue when people say, well, Ottawa's not a hockey city. Yeah, it actually is. Hamilton wouldn't support a franchise. Sure they would. Absolutely they would. There are very few cities in Canada that wouldn't. The only reason why I didn't have a team in Saskatchewan on the list, and I spent 2 years early in my life living in Saskatchewan. I know there's tons of sports fans in Saskatchewan. The issue for me is travel. So in the middle of the winter, if you got a team in Regina or Saskatoon, the amount of fans that can actually get to the game is going to be limited. That's the reason why I didn't have Saskatoon in there. Or Regina. I'd love to see a hockey team in Saskatchewan. Tons of hockey fans in Saskatchewan. It's never about just fandom. And, one of the biggest videos now that I've done is the attendance 10 years ago compared to today. And it doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to move said team because their attendance is really low. Because when I see really low attendance, the next thing I look at is where are they in the standings? How much are those fans being expected to pay for those tickets? What kind of success has that franchise had in the last 5 or 10 years? Which brings me back to Vegas. Vegas doesn't have 5 or 10 years. Vegas doesn't have back-to-back stats in terms of year to year to year. They are a huge success story now. And from this day forward, no matter what happens, they are a huge success. Do I expect them to fall back a little? Yeah. You have a lot of established teams that are not that far behind them? Not really. And there's still almost 50 games left in the season for most teams. So there's a lot of hockey left to be played. Because if we just look at the standings now and say, all right, well, that's it, then why do we have an 82-game schedule? Why do we keep going? Because there are teams who blow it in the second half, teams who come out of nowhere in the second half. I'm going to look up some stats on that. That's the next big project I'm going to give myself, is looking year to year at teams that were struggling in December or teams that were really ahead of the game in December that blew it, or teams that came from behind in December. And not to throw shade on anybody, but because historically it does happen. The American Thanksgiving talk about how, 85 or 88 or whatever percent it is of teams that are in the playoffs at the American Thanksgiving or in the playoffs at the end of the year, fine. 10 to 12% drop out. So there's still that chance that a team drops out that's in there. There's a fan base somewhere that right now is all gung-ho that by the end of the season, whether it's in April or it's in mid-March when it happens, they're going to be saying, oh God, what happened? And there's going to be a fan base who's looking at their team right now saying, well, we're pretty much done. That in March and April is saying, all right, cool, we're going to the playoffs. I didn't expect that. Because we're already seeing it. We're already seeing teams that last year in the playoffs were awesome that aren't in the playoffs. And last year, teams that played fantastic that, in the second half of the season may have missed the playoffs, and now they're in the playoffs. And Tampa and the Islanders are two examples of that. And yet Carolina, who had a good run down the stretch, not so much so. They're getting killed today by the Toronto Retinas. So, this is one of those things. It changes all the time. That's why I do these previews. That's why I do reviews. That's why I do my power rankings every week, not once a month. That's why I started doing power rankings about 3 weeks into the season. Because it does change quickly, and it's fun to watch as things change, as teams move up and teams move down. And it's always in flux. So it's not a matter of me looking at Vegas and saying, well, they won't work. There are still hockey fans who don't think Vegas will work long term as a hockey hub at all. But I'm looking at it and saying we don't have enough data to say, yes, 10 years from now, Vegas will still be one of the top 5 franchises in the NHL for attendance, merchandise, blah, blah, blah. Like, we just don't know. Because at the start, the Atlanta Thrashers looked like a huge success at the gates as a team. Remember, the year that Buffalo changed their jersey to the Buffaslug, it was the number 1 selling jersey in the NHL that year. So when everybody talked about how ugly it was, Buffalo ownership said, yeah, but look, we're selling the most jerseys of any other team in the NHL. We're doing fine. This is it's a very popular design. Not always. Sometimes a movie may do really well at the box office, and then word of mouth makes it tank. Sometimes hockey franchises do really well at the start, and then a combination of standings and word of mouth cause it to tank as well. And that's why I made the decisions I made yesterday with my 32-team league. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change any of them. Because it's one man's opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And hey, thank you so much for watching. And if you're in Atlanta, I feel for you. I do. Because the NHL abandoned the city twice. And, I still think hockey could have worked there, personally. Just like I think hockey could have worked in Hartford. Hockey was already working in Quebec, got moved out due to a low dollar. And don't point to attendance with Quebec, because Quebec was a terrible team for most of the time they were there. Especially about 4 of the last 6 years. But it wasn't attendance that caused them to move. It was a greedy owner and Canadian dollar being low. These things happen. I'm hoping it doesn't happen to these guys. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.